Marcus Williams had always believed that honesty was the cornerstone of character, a principle his grandmother had instilled in him during the long summer afternoons of his childhood in rural Georgia. As he sat in the pristine conference room of Henderson and Associates on that fateful Tuesday morning, surrounded by mahogany furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, he clung to that belief like a lifeline, while the world he had carefully constructed over 8 years began to crumble around him. "The missing funds were traced directly to your personal account, Marcus," said James Henderson, the silver-haired founding partner, whose reputation in corporate law was legendary throughout the state. His voice carried the weight of disappointment and disbelief, each word measured and deliberate. $75,000 in client funds, transferred systematically over the course of 6 months. The evidence is irrefutable. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him dizzy and disoriented. The accusation hit him like a physical blow, knocking the breath from his lungs and sending his heart into a frantic rhythm. "I don't understand," he managed to whisper, his voice barely audible in the spacious room. "I never touched any client funds. I would never betray the trust placed in me. This has to be some kind of mistake." "Unfortunately, it's not a mistake," interrupted David Blackstone, the firm's most ambitious and ruthless partner, sliding a thick manila folder across the polished conference table with theatrical precision. Blackstone was a man who commanded attention wherever he went. With his perfectly tailored suits, penetrating gray eyes, and silver tongue that could convince a jury of almost anything, the evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. Bank records, transaction logs, digital footprints, security camera timestamps, everything points directly to you, Marcus. With hands that trembled uncontrollably, Marcus opened the folder and began examining the documents that would destroy his life. Page after page revealed a methodical pattern of embezzlement that painted him as a calculating criminal who had systematically stolen from the very clients he had sworn to protect. The transfers were professional, carefully timed, and expertly concealed. Everything Marcus knew he wasn't capable of when it came to financial manipulation or deception of any kind. "This is absolutely impossible," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger as desperation fueled his denial. "Someone has deliberately framed me. I've dedicated my entire adult life to this firm, to serving our clients with integrity and dedication. Why would I destroy everything I've worked for over $75,000? It makes no sense whatsoever." Blackstone leaned back in his leather chair, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth like a predator, toying with wounded prey. "Gambling debts, perhaps? A secret addiction we don't know about? Financial pressures you've been hiding from us? Criminals always have their justifications, Marcus. They always believe they have good reasons for their betrayals." The word criminal hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, seeping into every corner of the room and settling into Marcus's consciousness, where it would echo for months to come. He looked around the conference table, at faces he had considered friendly and supportive for nearly a decade, colleagues who had shared countless coffee breaks, celebrated victories together, and worked side by side through long nights preparing for important cases. Now they stared at him with expressions of suspicion, disappointment, and something far worse than mere dislike, complete disgust and moral superiority. "David, perhaps we should exercise caution here," said Sarah Chen, the youngest partner in the firm's history, though her voice lacked any real conviction or support. "Marcus has been a valuable member of our team for 8 years. Surely he deserves some measure of due process before we rush to judgment." "Due process?" Blackstone's laugh was harsh and cutting, filled with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. "This isn't a criminal courtroom, Sarah. This is a business, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to protect our clients, our reputation, and our financial stability. Marcus, you are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building, and you have exactly 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings before you're permanently banned from these premises." Marcus stood on legs that felt like they were made of water, his entire career reduced to a cardboard box and a 15-minute walk of shame. As he packed his meager personal items, a framed photograph of his late parents taken on their wedding day, his law degree from the University of Georgia, a small succulent plant his assistant had given him for his birthday, and a few legal texts he had purchased with his own money. He could feel the weight of dozens of suspicious eyes following his every movement through the open-concept office space. Whispers followed him through the corridors like smoke from a fire, carrying words that would haunt his dreams for months to come: embezzlement, betrayal, theft, criminal. The very people who had wished him good morning just hours earlier now spoke about him in hushed tones filled with disgust and moral outrage. Frank Martinez, the head of security who had always greeted Marcus warmly and asked about his weekend plans, now walked beside him with professional distance and obvious discomfort. "I'm truly sorry it came to this, Mr. Williams," Frank murmured quietly as they approached the elevator bank. "You always seemed like one of the good ones." "I didn't do it, Frank," Marcus said, his voice hollow and defeated. "I swear on my parents' graves, I didn't steal anything from anyone. Someone has set me up, and I don't understand why or how." Frank's weathered face showed genuine sympathy, but his duty was clear and unchangeable. "I want to believe that, sir. I really do. But the evidence speaks pretty loudly, and it's not my place to judge. I just escort people out." The elevator doors closed with a soft whisper, and Marcus caught his reflection in the polished steel. A man he barely recognized, broken and bewildered, clutching a cardboard box like a drowning man might clutch driftwood. His carefully maintained professional appearance looked disheveled. His usually confident posture had crumbled into something resembling defeat, and his eyes held a confusion so profound it seemed to reach into his soul. That evening, Marcus sat in his modest one-bedroom apartment in a converted Victorian house, staring at the legal documents that had been served to him by a process server. Just hours after his dismissal, the firm wasn't content with simply firing him. They were pressing criminal charges and pursuing civil remedies to recover what they claimed were stolen funds, plus damages and legal fees. The story had already metastasized across legal blogs, local news websites, and social media platforms. Prominent attorney embezzles client funds in elaborate scheme. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from reporters seeking comment, former colleagues expressing their shock and disappointment, and friends who genuinely didn't know what to believe about someone they thought they knew well. Each ring felt like another nail being driven into the coffin of his reputation and future. Janet Rodriguez, his closest friend since their first year at law school 15 years earlier, arrived at his door that evening carrying bags of Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine that cost more than Marcus usually spent on groceries in a week. She found him sitting in near darkness, still wearing the same charcoal gray suit he had put on that morning when his biggest concern was a client presentation, the unopened cardboard box serving as a silent monument to his destroyed career. "Talk to me," Janet said gently, switching on table lamps and settling beside him on the threadbare couch he had owned since law school. "Tell me everything that happened, and don't leave out any details, no matter how small they might seem." Marcus recounted the entire horrific morning in excruciating detail. The ambush meeting, the overwhelming evidence, the cold efficiency with which his life had been dismantled. Janet listened without interruption, her expression growing more concerned and suspicious with each revelation he shared. "Marcus, I've known you for 15 years, Janet said firmly when he finished his account. "You once walked 6 blocks in a thunderstorm to return a $20 bill you found tucked inside a used textbook because you thought it might belong to the previous owner. You didn't do this. The question is, who did, and why did they choose you as their scapegoat?" "That's exactly what I keep asking myself," Marcus replied, running his hands through his hair in frustration. "The evidence is so clean, so professional, so perfectly constructed. Someone with extensive access to the firm's computer systems. Someone who understands our internal procedures and security protocols. Someone who knows how to manipulate financial records without leaving obvious traces." Janet paused with her chopsticks halfway to her mouth, a thought crystallizing in her mind. "Who at your firm has that level of access and technical knowledge?" Marcus considered the question carefully, mentally cataloging the firm's structure and security hierarchy. The senior partners have master-level access to everything. A few senior associates have administrative privileges for specific systems. The IT department obviously knows all the technical details. The accounting staff handles daily financial operations. He stopped abruptly, a cold realization washing over him like ice water. David Blackstone oversees most of the client trust account management. He has unrestricted access to every financial system in the firm. The same David Blackstone who was so eager to brand you a criminal this morning and orchestrate your very public humiliation? Over the following weeks, Marcus struggled to rebuild some semblance of a normal life, while simultaneously preparing his legal defense against charges that could send him to prison for a decade or more. He hired Elena Vasquez, a criminal defense attorney with an excellent reputation and fees that consumed his modest savings account within the first month. His attempts to find new employment were met with rejection after rejection as news of his alleged crimes spread throughout the tight-knit legal community. Former colleagues who had been friendly just weeks earlier now crossed streets to avoid awkward encounters. Invitations to professional events and social gatherings stopped arriving. The shame and isolation were suffocating, but Marcus refused to allow them to break his spirit or compromise his principles. "I will not plead guilty to crimes I didn't commit," he told Elena during one of their lengthy strategy sessions in her cramped office. "Even if it means risking a trial and potential prison sentence, I won't admit to something I know is false." Elena nodded approvingly, making notes on her legal pad. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear, because I believe we can prove your innocence. But it's going to require time, money, and some investigative work. The evidence against you is remarkably sophisticated. Perhaps too sophisticated for someone allegedly committing their first financial crime." "What do you mean by that?" "Professional embezzlers usually make mistakes, leave messy digital trails, act impulsively when they panic. This case looks meticulously planned and expertly executed. It's almost like someone with extensive experience in financial crimes created a perfect frame job." Meanwhile, David Blackstone appeared to be thriving in the aftermath of Marcus's destruction. Within 3 weeks of Marcus's termination, Blackstone had been promoted to managing partner, assuming responsibility for many of Marcus's former clients and cases. At firm's social events and professional conferences, he spoke eloquently about the paramount importance of trust, integrity, and moral leadership in the legal profession. "Discovering Marcus Williams' betrayal was one of the most painful experiences of my professional career," Blackstone told a gathering of potential clients and referring attorneys at the firm's annual networking event. "But we cannot allow our commitment to justice to be compromised by those who would exploit the sacred trust placed in them by vulnerable clients. Marcus may have deceived us for 8 long years, but ultimately, truth and justice will always prevail over deception and greed." Marcus watched video footage of this speech on the firm's website from his apartment, feeling physically ill as he witnessed the man who had destroyed his life being celebrated as a moral hero and champion of justice. The irony was so profound, it seemed almost surreal. But Elena's investigation was beginning to yield promising results that contradicted the seemingly airtight case against Marcus. Her examination revealed several critical inconsistencies in the prosecution's evidence. The offshore account bearing Marcus's name had been opened using forged identification documents that contained subtle errors someone familiar with Marcus's personal information might make. The IP addresses used to initiate the fraudulent transfers traced back to public Wi-Fi networks at coffee shops and libraries that Marcus could definitively prove he had never visited during the relevant time periods. Most intriguingly, the timing of every single transfer corresponded precisely with occasions when Marcus was in court proceedings, client depositions, or other professional activities that were extensively documented and easily verifiable through court records and witness testimony. "Whoever orchestrated this frame job knew your professional schedule intimately," Elena explained during one of their meetings. "They deliberately chose times when you had ironclad alibis, probably thinking that investigators would never examine the timing so closely. It's actually working strongly in our favor now." As months passed, Marcus found part-time work as a paralegal at Hartwell & Associates, a small firm specializing in representing individuals who had been wrongfully accused of various crimes. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on him, but the work provided both income and a sense of purpose during his darkest period. Thomas Hartwell, the firm's founder and a former prosecutor, who had dedicated his later career to correcting injustices within the legal system, took a personal interest in Marcus's case after reviewing the evidence files. "I've encountered dozens of frame jobs during my 30 years in criminal law," Thomas told Marcus, after spending an entire weekend analyzing the case materials. "This particular scheme is exceptionally elegant and sophisticated. Whoever planned this possesses advanced knowledge of both financial systems and legal procedures. They're intelligent, methodical, and had perfect access to both your personal information and your former firm's internal systems. Do you have any theories about who might be responsible? Thomas smiled grimly, his weathered face creasing with the wisdom of hard-earned experience. In my experience, the person who points the accusatory finger most loudly and dramatically often has the dirtiest hands and the most to hide. The breakthrough that would ultimately vindicate Marcus came from an entirely unexpected source. Jennifer Park, his former administrative assistant, reached out through an encrypted email account she had created specifically for this communication. Her message was brief, but loaded with implications. I can't live with keeping this secret any longer. I know what really happened to you, and I have concrete proof. Can we meet somewhere completely private and secure? They arranged to meet at a small family restaurant in a suburban town 30 miles outside the city, far from anywhere they might encounter colleagues or reporters. Jennifer arrived looking exhausted and frightened, constantly glancing around the nearly empty dining room as if she expected to be followed or watched. I've been struggling with this knowledge for months, she said, sliding an encrypted flash drive across the table to Marcus with trembling hands. I worked late most evenings, often staying until 8 or 9 o'clock to finish projects and prepare for the next day. I witnessed things I was never supposed to see, and I documented them because something felt wrong. Marcus stared at the small device that might contain his salvation. What exactly is on this drive? Security footage from the firm's server room that I copied before it was automatically deleted from the system. Time-stamped access logs showing exactly when David Blackstone used his credentials to access the client trust account systems during off hours. Email communications that he thought he had permanently deleted from the servers. And most importantly, audio recordings from a hidden microphone that was installed in his office during the security system upgrade 6 months ago. A microphone that he never knew existed. The evidence contained on Jennifer's flash drive was nothing short of devastating to Blackstone's carefully constructed deception. Security camera footage clearly showed him accessing the server room at unusual hours, using his master-level credentials to manipulate the financial management systems. The recovered email communications detailed his elaborate plan to frame Marcus, including extensive research into Marcus's personal banking information, daily, schedule, and professional activities. Most damaging were the audio recordings from his office, which captured him confessing the entire scheme to an unidentified accomplice during what he believed was a private conversation. Marcus Williams is the perfect scapegoat for this operation. Blackstone's voice was crystal clear on the recordings. He has a spotless reputation, a trusting personality, and no political connections powerful enough to cause problems for us. He'll accept responsibility for the theft, and I'll emerge as the heroic partner who exposed his criminal behavior. The $75,000 is merely the opening gambit. Once I'm promoted to managing partner, I'll have unrestricted access to millions in client funds. Elena worked closely with federal prosecutors to authenticate the evidence and verify that it had not been tampered with or manipulated in any way. Digital forensics experts confirmed that all the files were genuine and had been created contemporaneously with the events they documented. The case against Marcus began to collapse, while a new federal investigation into Blackstone's activities gained momentum. The FBI raid on Henderson and Associates occurred on a Wednesday morning, precisely 8 months after Marcus had been escorted from the building in disgrace. He watched from a coffee shop across the street as federal agents marched through the same lobby where his career had ended, carrying boxes of evidence, computer equipment, and financial records. Local news crews arrived within hours, their cameras capturing the same entrance where Marcus had made his walk of shame. David Blackstone was arrested at his suburban mansion that evening as he returned home from what would be his final day as managing partner. The local news footage showed him in handcuffs, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, and his face pale with shock and disbelief. The reporter's voice provided narration for the dramatic reversal of fortune. David Blackstone, the managing partner who claimed to have heroically exposed an embezzlement scheme 8 months ago, now faces federal charges for orchestrating that same embezzlement as part of an elaborate conspiracy to defraud clients and frame an innocent colleague. Marcus felt no satisfaction or joy watching Blackstone's perp walk on the evening news, only a profound sense of vindication, mixed with exhaustion from the long ordeal. The man who had branded him a criminal was now wearing handcuffs, and facing the possibility of decades in federal prison for the very crimes Marcus had been falsely accused of committing. The subsequent federal investigation revealed that Blackstone's criminal activities were far more extensive and sophisticated than anyone had initially suspected. He had been systematically embezzling client funds for over 3 years, stealing nearly $600,000 through a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. The frame job targeting Marcus had been his desperate attempt to deflect suspicion when an internal audit began to uncover discrepancies in the trust account records. He believed he could sacrifice you to protect himself and his criminal enterprise, Elena explained as they prepared for Marcus's complete exoneration hearing. But his arrogance and need for recognition ultimately destroyed him. He couldn't resist taking public credit for exposing you, and those public statements will significantly increase his eventual prison sentence. The formal hearing to dismiss all charges against Marcus was held in the same courthouse where he had expected to stand trial for crimes he didn't commit. Judge Patricia Monroe, a respected jurist known for her fairness and attention to detail, reviewed the new evidence with obvious distaste for the injustice that had been perpetrated against an innocent man. "Mr. Williams," Judge Monroe said, as she formally dismissed all charges and sealed his arrest record, "this court extends its sincere and heartfelt apologies for the ordeal you have endured through no fault of your own. Your complete innocence has been established beyond any possible doubt, and I sincerely hope that justice, while delayed, will provide some measure of peace and closure." Marcus rose to address the court, his voice steady and strong, despite the overwhelming emotions threatening to consume him. "Your Honor, I harbor no desire for vengeance against those who wronged me so grievously. I sought only the truth, and I am profoundly grateful that it has finally emerged from the darkness where it was hidden. Justice has been served." The aftermath unfolded with the precision of a perfectly choreographed performance. Blackstone ultimately pled guilty to multiple federal felonies, including wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The substantial civil lawsuit that Marcus filed against both Blackstone and Henderson and Associates resulted in a multi-million-dollar settlement that ensured his financial security for the remainder of his life. Henderson and Associates offered Marcus his former position back, along with an immediate promotion to senior partner, a substantial salary increase, and a very public apology printed in every major legal publication. Marcus politely but firmly declined their offer, having discovered his true calling in helping others who had been wrongfully accused of crimes they didn't commit. "I learned something profound during this nightmare," Marcus told Janet over dinner at their favorite restaurant, the same modest establishment where they had celebrated their law school graduation 15 years earlier. "Sometimes the most devastating experiences in our lives prepare us for the most meaningful work we're destined to do." "And what's the most meaningful outcome of this entire ordeal?" Marcus smiled, thinking of the dozens of innocent people he had helped exonerate during his first year at Hartwell and Associates, the gratitude in their eyes when justice was finally served, and the knowledge that his suffering had been transformed into purpose. "I discovered that I was always meant to be fighting for people who can't fight for themselves, standing up for truth when it's buried under lies and deception." 2 years after his exoneration, Marcus received a handwritten letter from David Blackstone at the Federal Correctional Institution, where he was serving his sentence. The handwriting was shaky and uncertain, the tone desperate and pleading. "Marcus, I know you have absolutely no reason to forgive me for what I did to you, but I need you to understand that I never intended for the situation to escalate so far beyond my control. The financial pressure, the crushing debt, the unrealistic expectations, they drove me to commit acts I never imagined I was capable of. I destroyed your life to preserve my own, and I will carry that unbearable guilt until the day I die. You demonstrated more grace, dignity, and moral strength in your darkest hour than I showed in what I arrogantly believed was my moment of triumph. I hope that someday, somehow, you might find it in your heart to forgive me, though I know I don't deserve even that small mercy." Marcus read the letter carefully twice, then filed it away in his desk drawer without crafting a response. Forgiveness might come eventually, but it would happen on his own terms and timeline. For now, he was content to allow justice and the natural consequence of actions to speak for themselves. The truth possessed an inherent power that no amount of deception or manipulation could permanently suppress. Innocence carried a strength that even the most elaborate criminal conspiracy couldn't ultimately destroy. And sometimes, the universe operated according to principles of justice that transcended human planning and control. Marcus Williams learned that maintaining dignity in the face of profound injustice was not a sign of weakness, but rather evidence of unshakable moral strength. He discovered that preserving one's principles when everything seemed lost was not naivety, but rather the highest form of courage. He had been branded a criminal by someone who embodied the very corruption and betrayal he pretended to despise. But ultimately, handcuffs found their way to the correct wrists. Truth emerged from its temporary hiding place, and karma, patient, methodical, and absolutely inexorable, delivered justice with a precision that no human institution could match. As Marcus sat in his new office, working late into the evening to help another wrongfully accused client prepare their defense, he often reflected on the strange and circuitous journey that had brought him to this place of purpose and meaning. He had lost a prestigious career, but discovered his true calling. He had been publicly disgraced, but emerged with his integrity not only intact but strengthened. He had been betrayed by someone he trusted, but had discovered reserves of inner strength he never knew he possessed. The brass nameplate on his office door read, "Marcus Williams, attorney for the innocent and wrongfully accused." It was, he knew with absolute certainty, exactly where he belonged and precisely what he was meant to do with his life. The man who had called him a criminal was now wearing a federal prison uniform and would remain behind bars for the next decade and a half, while Marcus wore the invisible armor of integrity restored and purpose finally fulfilled. Justice, it seemed, possessed not only a profound sense of irony, but also a very long memory and an absolutely perfect sense of timing.